Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. So this is the second of 5 lunch and learn kind of webinars that we are having in March 2021 by VALP. If you weren't with us last week, we explained that although we could not meet again this spring, VALP arranged 5 webinars for a lunch and learn style hour each Wednesday in March. We've had glowing feedback for Becky Gwynn's presentation last week that she presented. So if you would like to see her presentation again, please visit our website. Let me go next. There we go. Our website, virginiawetlands.org, and there is a link right there. You can see it. This is like straight off the website from like 2 minutes ago. If you do the permitting the incidental take of migratory birds link, you will get to that recording. Also on the webpage, you can see that there's more information. We have a VALP student scholarship that went unclaimed last year. So that has been doubled now to $500, and we are currently accepting applications. So please get that out to any students that you know. And the membership link as well. As we said last week, any memberships paid in 2020 are going to extend through 2021. But if you aren't already a member, please do consider joining us. And also, until March 15, we are accepting applications for nominations for the VALP board seats that are available. We also have several committees. So if you would like to get involved with the committee, there is a link for board and committees. So with all that business taken care of, let's get on to the presentations. Today we have Michelle Henachek and Dave Davis of the Department of the Environmental Quality of the Office of Wetland and Stream Protection. Michelle is the Senior Wetland Ecologist with Virginia DEQ. She works collaboratively with VIMS to develop and implement Virginia DEQ's wetland monitoring assessment program, and she'll be speaking on WetCAT today. We also have Dave Davis, who is the Director of the Office of Wetland and Stream Protection. He wears many hats, some of which are heading up Virginia's independent non-tidal wetland program, the non-regulatory wetland program, surface water investigation, and stream gauging program. So I really appreciate you both being here to talk, and I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Michelle.
Okay, can everybody see that? Can everyone see the Virginia wetlands? Okay, yep. Make sure that it was actually up. Okay, I am not going to go into the background of how our Virginia Wetland Condition Assessment tool is developed. I'm just going to go into an overview of our objectives and layers that are within the tool and how to use some of the geoprocessing features. So, in order to achieve our objectives, we needed to first establish baseline conditions to basically support our regulatory decision-making and allow for evaluation and reporting of our wetland conditions, as well as provide information for our policy development. And it was also to form the basis for reporting on wetland status and trends as part of our 305B list. The science-based strategy evaluates the conditions of wetlands over time. And then that data that's collected from the assessment has been compiled into an online GIS-based wetland data viewer called the Wetland Condition Assessment Tool, WetCAT. One unique aspect of WetCAT is its online interactive user interface, which allows users to overlay data such as previously permitted impacts and impaired waters and run through various geoprocessing tools to visualize cumulative impacts, downstream flow, and up-gradient drainage areas. And to start off, some of the layers that we have the boundary as well as the parcels and the physiographic provinces. We also have the core permit data as well as all of our own DEQ permits. And we're always working to get updates from the Corps for their permits as well to add into this. So while we might not have every single one, the Corps permits, we are working with them to get the information out at WARMS. These facilities are class 7 waters and our impaired waters list as well. We also have delineated wetlands on here when we can get those to upload them into WetCAT from shape files that are provided to us. We try to install those as well. And then the basis of WetCAT is on our NWI conditions, and I will go into that further into this. We have our preservation layers on here, as well as our mitigation and mitigation banks. And when you click on the information, when you click on a site, it provides you more information. We also have all of these layers as well, such as our soils, our land cover database, historic imagery. And this is the main part of WetCAT. So this is an example of the geoprocessing tools. First, you'd use the identify button to click on the wetland of interest, and then a text box will appear with specific information. All that information is generated for whichever site you choose, site X. The wetlands are scored based on the habitat and water quality stressors associated with surrounding land use types. And those scores range from 0 to 1, with 1 being the best. You can recalculate those scores based on anticipated land cover changes due to the proposed activity. The types of geoprocessing tools we have is the one, if you look on here, it says cumulative results, and that provides a summary of all data within a 1 kilometer buffer around the input coordinates. We also have downstream path, which creates the downstream flow path within a 2 kilometer buffer around the input coordinates. It's the distance to the nearest intersected impaired waters that's reported, along with the general distances and information about the intersected wetlands and land use. And then you have a contributing watershed button that creates a drainage or watershed polygon within 30 meters of the coordinates. The habitat and water quality scores and land use percentages are reported, and a 200-meter buffer will be displayed. Now, WetCAT will not give a specific decision for a permit, but instead, it's just better information to make an improved decision when you consider all the factors for a better analysis of the landscape. We also have the ability to insert shapefiles and run the analysis as long as the site is on an NWI mapped wetland. Or if you provide a wetland and we upload that wetland, then it will run it on that as well. This is an old result report, so kind of you can use it as an overall. But to follow up from the previous slide, a report is generated providing the results. The scoring of the wetland is identified as either slightly stressed, somewhat stressed, or severely stressed. So it's kind of, you don't even really have to pay attention to the numbers. It will tell you if it's trending towards being really bad or if it's trending towards being better. And the information that's provided can show you the change in the wetland stress over time from actually 2001 up to 2016. This year, information for 2021 will be added. So therefore, you can use this information to show that a site might be getting worse or getting better, and then we can start to look at the reason for why is that happening. It also provides you information regarding a restoration potential amount. And as you can see, for an example, for this site, the site itself is getting worse over time. So, but the habitat and the water quality restoration potential is increasing for obvious reasons. You can also look at, this information provides you an average habitat and water quality score and the percentage of impaired waters within each HUC. So we can use this information, for example, when comparing HUCs for restoration purposes to see where the best HUC could be for improving water quality or habitat. The monitoring assessment data is used to evaluate proposed wetland impacts during our permitting review as part of our regulatory program. We also can evaluate performance of wetland restoration and compensatory wetland mitigation and replacing wetland acreage and function. And we can also evaluate cumulative wetland impacts and restoration efforts in watersheds relative to ambient ecological conditions. I know this is a lot to take in, but overall, WetCAT was used by VDOT to look at cumulative impacts associated with different scenario routes as part of the Hampton Roads Crossings EIS during their NEPA process. Now, this is not giving a specific decision for a permit, rather more useful information to make an improved decision on the best route when considering all the factors for better analysis of the landscape. So VDOT is using WetCAT during their NEPA process to look at routes to see overall which route would be the best for their projects. This slide just simply shows some of the possibilities of WetCAT for our regulatory and non-regulatory purposes. WetCAT can be used to help answer questions such as like, how many wetland impacts have we already permitted in this watershed? What's the relative condition of remaining wetlands in this watershed? And will permitted impacts degrade the condition of the avoided wetlands? Basically, what are the conditions of the wetlands in the vicinity of the proposed impacts? WetCAT can also be used to target degraded wetlands for restoration projects, as I was talking about before, by identifying areas that have a greater need for improvement of water quality and habitat based on the stress levels in those areas. And that's it. If we have time later after the presentations are over with, if anybody wants me to go like live and get on and run around and kind of show you some things in WetCAT, I can try to do that. I don't know about, how fast it might be with the internet connection, but I'm more than happy to do that or just answer questions if people want to give me a call or shoot me an email. I'll be more than happy to help out.
Thank you, Michelle. We appreciate that. And yeah, and we will have a question and answer session towards the end where folks can type in some questions. But I really appreciate that.
So you want me to stop sharing or just do new share to go and load Dave's?
I guess you could try the new share to load Dave's.
Did that work?
Sure did. Okay, Dave, you're up next.
All right, very good. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Today I'm going to talk very briefly about the state surface water determination. Next slide, Michelle. And actually the next one after that, please. So what is a state surface water determination? Why is DEQ doing it? And what does this mean for consultants and their clients and all of that? Well, 2020 was quite a year on a number of fronts. We had the pandemic, we had lots of stuff going on, but three significant things happened with federal rule changes. The first change was in June 2020, and that was the Navigable Waters Protection Rule. And I'm sure all of you have studied it and probably know it better than I do. But that is in effect now. And the changes in that rule reflect some changes in federal jurisdiction, definitions of different types of waters, and so forth. The other things that changed on the federal level in 2020, besides the Navigable Waters Protection Rule, in September, there was a new 401 certification rule put out by EPA. And then later on in December of 2020, The Corps put forward changes to the nationwide permit program. So all of those things happen, but what does that mean for DEQ? Well, the first thing it means is nothing in state law or state regulation has changed. If you needed something from DEQ in 2020, then you need that same thing from DEQ in 2021. There has been no change to state jurisdiction or definitions, no change in state law, no change in state regulations. Everything from DEQ's end has remained in place. But what has happened is that the overlap in those types of waters that the feds and the state regulate have decreased. So now the federal government, with their rule changes in June of 2020, which changed jurisdiction and definition, they are regulating, in some cases, not all, but in some cases, less area on the ground. But DEQ is still regulating the things we always have. So what does this mean for property owners and applicants and consultants? This means that there's probably going to be some permitting efficiencies lost. We anticipate that there's going to be more instances where applicants will need two separate permits, one from DEQ and one from the Corps for their projects. We are collaborating with the Corps, with the Norfolk District, and have been throughout all of these federal changes and the lead up to these federal changes. And we're hoping that, in the future, we may be able to work out a SOP, standard operating procedure, or some sort of agreement so that we can capture back as many of these permitting efficiencies as we can. But that's unknown at this time. Next slide, Michelle. So when the Navigable Waters Protection Rule came into place, we realized that there were going to be instances where the Corps may continue to confirm delineations, just like they always have, but now there could be a need for DEQ to confirm surface waters, both wetlands and streams. So in the past, DEQ and the Corps essentially regulated and identified those physical water features. We had a streamlined process between the SPGP and the nationwide permits and so forth, and it all worked pretty well. However, with the Navigable Waters Rule, we're not sure how that's going to work any longer, and we suspect that now there are waters that the federal government will not take jurisdiction over, but the state still retains its jurisdiction, and we want to make sure that there's no unauthorized impacts to state surface waters because of these changes in the federal process. Next slide. So as many of you are aware, excuse me, the Corps has two different types of jurisdictional determinations. The preliminary JD, where they're identifying all of the aquatic resources on a site. And if your project were to get a PJD, then you probably won't need anything else from DEQ. We may ask you to submit the delineation report, but as long as all of the water features have been identified and confirmed by the Corps on that site, you probably won't need anything separate. However, with the Corps' approved jurisdictional determination, as we understand it, AJDs are only identifying those aquatic resources that are within federal jurisdiction. And the Corps, will not be, through the AJD process, necessarily confirming all of the aquatic resources that may meet the delineation manual on site. And in those cases, a state surface water determination will be required. Next slide. So I'm not going to read all of this. You have the slide, and this is being recorded. But so let's say that you're a consultant and your client wants an AJD from the Corps. They get that AJD, but you still need a surface water determination from DEQ for state waters. So you can request that from the appropriate DEQ regional office. You can submit the same delineation package that you sent to the Corps. We're not trying to create extra work for anybody. The only different thing that we need is we do need a property access form. And that's just so that we can go on the site and do the determination. Most of the time, that's not a big issue because the property owner is involved in the application process, but sometimes there's a disconnect. So it's always good for us to have that sign off. Now, when should you submit that? Always, always submit your surface water determination request before you submit a JPA. Otherwise, it's just going to take more time. It's just going to delay the process on our end, delay the process on your end, delay the process for your client. Always get that box checked off before you submit your JPA. Beyond that, there's a couple other things you could do. You can get the AJD from the Corps and then submit that same information to us with a request to do the state determination. If it's PJD and the Corps has identified all aquatic features on the site, then just submit that delineation report to us and the Corps confirmation, and that will proceed as it always has. And then if you're not sure how things are going to shake out and whether your client wants an AJD or a PJD, we can always do concurrent site visits with the Corps and try to get that box checked for everybody in one site visit. Next slide. So this is just an example of a project. Like it says on the slide, the area that's in the red bubble was not considered a federal water under an AJD. Now, thankfully, the consultant delineated all of the surface waters on that project site that met the criteria of the delineation manual. And when the Corps went out, the Corps took jurisdiction over those areas that met the navigable waters rule. And then the other areas, which are represented inside the red bubble there, those are not federal waters, but they still remain state waters. And they still require permitting from DEQ, even though the area in red does not require a permit from the Corps. So what this means in your JPA is your impact tables may be different. So you may have certain impacts that are under Corps regulation and jurisdiction, and then a higher number of impacts under state jurisdiction. It also means then that there's probably going to be 2 different mitigation requirements. Next slide. I think that's it. Oh, I think this is the last one. So what can you do when you submit a state surface water determination request to the regional office? Well, just like you have to do with the Corps, make sure that your field flagging is still in the field when we go out there. We're going to be confirming the state boundaries just like the Corps has in the past. We can't confirm your boundary if we can't see it through your flagging or if we don't have the delineation report or so forth. Provide a table of the state surface waters. As I said earlier, your impact tables are probably going to be different in some cases now between what's under federal jurisdiction versus what's under state jurisdiction. And while we're out there, we can also confirm the cordon classification and any stream assessments. Those are things that we do in the state process. And if we do it all one time with one site visit, hopefully it saves everybody some time and effort. And I believe that's the last slide, Michelle. Yep. The last thing I will say, this is a very, no pun intended, but very fluid situation. None of us really know how it's going to shake out. It's evolving every day, it seems. So stay tuned. But as I've explained in the presentation, this is where we are today, and reasonably, it's reasonably assured that this is where we're going to be in the next 4 to 6 weeks. And then as we get more of these state surface water determination requests in, there may be some adjustment to the process as we get a little bit better at this. So with that, I guess we'll have questions in a little bit. And that's all I have, Laura.
Well, thanks a lot, Dave. I'm looking at the question and answers, and I don't see any opened questions right now. We did have a couple of folks that are interested in seeing the WetCAT function live, if possible. Oh, let me see. All right, I've got a couple of new questions coming up. Can you provide, and this is for Dave, can you provide any updates on the 401 certification associated with the nationwide permits?
Sure. So back in December, the Corps put out their notice for proposed changes to the nationwide permits, and we provided 401 cert for all, what was it, 57 or 58 nationwide permits. And then the Corps decided, for whatever their reasons were, to only finalize 16 of those. So the first thing to be aware of is that the 401 certification for those 2017 nationwide permits that did not change, that 401 cert is still in effect. And projects that use those, 42 or so? Projects that use those 42 nationwide permits that did not change go forward as we have in the past. So for those 16 nationwide permits that did change in January 2021, the Corps reviewed our proposed 401 certs and declined, I think that was their word, declined to carry our 401 certifications forward in the nationwide permit program. And what that means is, for those projects that are proposing to use one of those new or finalized 2021 nationwide permits, you will now have to come to DEQ to get a VWP, general permit or IP, just our normal threshold apply. We hope that there may be another mechanism that we can work with the Corps on to change that, but right now it appears anyway that that projects proposing to use one of those new 16 nationwide permits will need a VWP.
Great. I think that answered a couple of the questions that have popped up. Can you speak to the the SSWD, how that's going to factor into the nationwide permit 57?
Well, that's going to factor into all of those 16 new nationwide permits, not just 57. But basically, there's a couple of things going on. And so you want to try to think of the separate processes. So you have the changes in federal jurisdiction from the navigable waters rule. That's where the state surface water determination comes in. Over top of that, you have changes to 16 nationwide permits. So in total, what it means is if you are looking at a project, regardless for now, what type of permitting mechanism you use, you're going to have to submit a state surface water determination on those project sites that either get an AJD or are otherwise have surface water features beyond federal jurisdiction. And that is regardless of nationwide permit changes. So what we really hope, at least those of us here at DEQ, what we really hope is that property owners, project proponents are going to get a PJD from the Corps, which hopefully will identify and confirm all of the surface water features on the site. And we continue forward as we have in the past. But if that does not occur, and only some surface waters on a site are confirmed by the Corps, then DEQ will have to confirm those other sites.
Gotcha. Let's see.
And you know, sometimes I think we'd be better with a flow chart, but I haven't figured which way to put the arrows on that flow chart yet.
Yeah. Let's see. Do you know, have any idea how many surface water determination requests you're going to receive? And has DEQ received any additional funding?
Well, we know that, and there may be some Corps reps on the webinar today that have more precise data, but I believe that the Corps generally sees somewhere in the mid to upper hundreds of field delineation requests. So we generally use the number somewhere around 800 in terms of what we might expect on a given year. And hopefully it'll be less than that number if more project proponents get a PJD. But you know, right now we're figuring somewhere or more or less 800 requests. And then we got 0 funding to do this additional work. We got no additional positions, no additional funding. So we're doing more with the same, which equals less actually. And what that means for project proponents and consultants is it's just going to take more time. And the sooner you get your delineation requests in, hopefully to the Corps and hopefully their PJDs, then we'll be moving forward in a method that we're all used to. But if not, then DEQ will be doing the state surface water determination, and that's just going to potentially take more time for everybody.
Gotcha. We have a clarification from the answer you had before. Essentially says, can you clarify that? Did you mean you want a PJD, not AJD, so that you know that DEQ is covered? I'm not quite sure.
That is DEQ's preference, because we understand from Tom Walker at the Corps that if the Corps performs a PJD, they are looking at all surface water features on a site, and that would cover DEQ.
Okay,
You would just submit that delineation report and the confirmation, as you always have, and we would go forward. We're trying not to create any more work than we have to. But if the project proponent gets an AJD, that's where things get different.
okay. So we have a question asking about the AJD confirming all surface waters, but it needs to be PJD confirming all surface waters. So it was an anonymous question that was asked.
If you have a site where all of the surface waters have been identified and all of those surface waters are covered in an AJD, that's okay too. The point here to keep in mind is that for DEQ's regulatory and permitting purposes, we need to make sure that all surface waters have been delineated. All surface waters that DEQ regulates need to be delineated.
Gotcha. We also have a question of how is DEQ planning on determining the limits of stream features in the SSWD, particularly for determining the boundary between ephemeral streams and erosional features? Will there be DEQ guidance on identification of an ordinary high water mark or some other stream delineation method?
We're going to use the methods we've always used in the past. So for streams, it's been, does it have a bed, a bank, and an ordinary high water mark? There may be some ephemeral features that are included in our jurisdiction. There may be some, particularly in the far upper reaches of a tributary system, that would not be included. But that's a case-by-case situation.
All right. How long do you expect the VWP or VWP waiver request to take?
Just depends on the project.
Okay.
I mean, general permits take somewhere in the 25 to 45 day time frame. An IP takes somewhere in the 90 to 120 day time frame. That's not going to change.
All right. Let's see, for projects getting a VWP in place of the 401, will an SPGP be issued alongside it, or will there be a VWP and a NWP issued for a site?
Okay, first of all, the VWP permit will be carrying the 401 cert with it. So for those projects that are going to receive one of the 16 new nationwide permits, you're now going to have the Corps nationwide permit and then the separate VWP permit with its 401 cert.
Gotcha. Thank you. Let's see. Was the exclusion of ephemeral streams from federal regulation for implementing the SSWD? Isolated wetlands have been non-federal since SWA and NC, and we've managed for a number of years without a separate process. Can the state reevaluate their stance on regulating ephemeral waters and allow impacts to be managed under 402? Other states have removed ephemeral waters from 401 review.
Brandon, that's a packed question there. The short answer is, in identifying areas on the landscape that meet DEQ jurisdiction as a wetland, it's got to have the 3 parameters of the delineation manual. And if it's a stream, it's got to have a bed, a bank, and an ordinary high water mark. And then if it doesn't have any of those things, then most likely, in the vast majority of time, it is probably some sort of overland flow or Maybe it's erosional features or something like that. So we have not at DEQ talked about including or excluding ephemeral features because we regulate streams, and whether they're perennial, intermittent, or ephemeral, if it meets, the criteria of having a bed, a bank, and an ordinary high water mark, then we're going to consider that a regulated stream.
All right, I think we have one last one. Well, maybe a couple more. It sounds like the SWD will still be handled on a case-by-case basis if DEQ will review. Even if a PJD is issued, will DEQ establish general guidance on what could trigger the need for additional evaluation or the size of project?
Well, if a PJD is issued, then we're just going to look at the paperwork that's submitted and just verify that, it covers all of the surface waters. So that's, and then it'll move forward. So I don't see that as a new pathway or a different issue than we've had in the past.
And four.
So there's a question about a blanket waiver.
Yes.
I'm not really sure what the commenter is talking about a blanket waiver. Waivers are, there's a couple of different uses of the word waiver. And I'm assuming, without any additional information, that the commenter is talking about a waiver of a 401 certification. As we see it, the 401 certification now comes in the form of a VWP permit. So unless a VWP permit is not needed because of one of the exclusions in our regulation, then I am not anticipating some sort of blanket waiver.
Gotcha. Brandon says thanks.
Sorry. I see a question about updating the JPA.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know that there needs to be some JPA revisions. It is a joint permit, so it's does require the core DEQ and VMRC to sit down and open that up. And we do recognize there are some revisions necessary. I really don't see us opening that up for a few months because we need to see how this process is going to shake out, see what kind of groove we're all going to fall into and what makes sense. And I would hate to open up the JPA and make changes based on what we think will happen, and then have to open it up again 6 months later when we get a little more information on the ground and see how things are actually happening. So we have identified things that need changing, and again, we're going to see how this plays out before we propose opening the JPA.
Looks like Brandon had one more question.
Category of ephemeral streams similar to Iowa map. There could be. We don't have anything proposed right now, but we have identified some possible statute and regulatory revisions that may need to be changed. One of the reasons why we're not proceeding too quickly is because the new Biden administration is reviewing these federal environmental changes that have happened. And so we want to see if the Biden administration is going to make any changes to what we have today. So I don't want to go 500 miles an hour and propose all of these changes, whether it's statute, reg, guidance, JPA forms, and then have to walk all of that back 6 months later. So that's why we're taking a little slower approach to those things. So yes, Brandon, it could be a possibility, and we have talked about things of that nature, but we have nothing proposed today.
Well, thank you, Dave. That is all really helpful. And as we don't have any questions open right this second, and we have a couple minutes to spare, I believe Michelle is gonna share her screen and go live on WetCAT.
I just gotta figure out how do I actually, it says share screen, but where do I go? Ah, I found it. Never mind. Okay. Can you, Laura, can you see WetCAT?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so when you pull WetCAT up initially, this is what's going to pop up. This box right here is great. It's got everything in here that explains how to use WetCAT, what it, what the different toolbars are used for, and so forth. And it's even got some tutorials on here on how to get started and adding layers and so forth. So this is really great. And when you click out of this, if for some reason you are in here in WetCAT and you need to go back to it because you can't remember, just click on this little eye over here in the toolbar and go to help, and it'll pull it right back up for you. So now we have included a portion of North Carolina because we actually have an MOA with them to look at waters that are associated with the Albemarle Pamlico Sound. So we are working with North Carolina now as well for their use in WetCAT. We're excited about that. I'm going to end up jumping around, and I apologize for that. There's no real easy way to kind of show WetCAT. Over here on your right, you have your toolbar, which I just had open, and then you have your data layers that are all in here. So to start off with, for your toolbar, you have different base maps that you can go into here and choose for whatever you might be interested in looking at. You have your search by address or permits. You can hide the scale bar and so forth. This is just to clear your graphics, and I'll show you how to do that. This is to measure, draw things out. And then here is your geoprocessing tools that I talked about during the slides. I'll show you how to do that. You can also select hot codes. Here's where you would insert your shape files. And then, oops, sorry. And then I hit this one, and then you can also print. So I've gone in and I've already marked an area. And I've already turned on the NWI layers, which I'll show you the layers as well. Okay, so here are all your layers that I went through on the slides, except for we have added this shoreline inventory and management layer, which will show you all the tidal shoreline inventory information that DEMS is working on. It's really interesting. We also have this vulnerability and risk as well that they've done with headwater wetlands and tidal marshes. And oh, and by the way, if you need to see any information, there's also the layer metadata that's next to each one. Of course, land cover, historic imagery, and so forth. So let's go up here. I've turned on the NWI conditions. If you have to zoom in to a certain scale in order to get the NWI information to pop up. This one right here, the water quality condition that has the dates associated, the years associated with it, that is going to show you the trend over time. So I will show you what that is as well. So for right now, though, we're going to go and look at this site. I've already marked it. So when you pull it up, it's going to give you this box over here. It's going to give you what the type of wetland that it is, the emergent, how many acres that polygon is that we're looking at. Didn't realize I hit a pond. So it's going to show you the habitat score. And as you can see, it's decreasing, so it's getting worse. It was only somewhat stressed, which is the middle bucket, basically. But now it's trending towards somewhat severely stressed, so it looks like it's getting worse. The water quality score has basically stayed the same. And of course, I randomly picked this one, so it might not be actually a good one to show. But it's going to give you the habitat minimum, average, and so forth. There is another record showing that it's also emergent and is it seasonally flooded, I think. Then let's see. So the wetland condition is the same for that other portion of that polygon. And then you have all of this information as well, which shows that there's not any water quality stressors associated with this right now. We didn't turn on the conservation lands or any of that, so that wouldn't be on here. It's just telling you what type of soils there are. Again, you know what, let me pick a different one because this one is not going to be good because of the fact that it's just a pond. So let's go over here and do this one. There we go. If you just click on it instead of identifying it, as you can see, this polygon pops up where it's got purple. And this is where you can actually go in and it will still give you the same information as in the wetland information. And this one appears to be somewhat stressed, basically staying the same. It gives you the habitat restoration potential, water quality score. Looks like the water quality stress is still basically maintained the whole time. But this part right here is where you can go in and rescore the wetlands. So if you think that like half of this site is going to be impacted, you can actually go in and change the scoring to show that. And it will give you a new habitat and water quality condition score. And so it will tell you this one has some soils associated with it. I must be hitting ponds everywhere around here. So you know, like go somewhere else. Not exactly the easier one to get. Go up here in some headwaters. There. Okay, now here we go. Now we can see that it provides the soil information for you and tells you all the soils that are associated with it. It gives you the parcel information. So if you need to contact somebody, it will give you the parcel ID, so you can then go to your county and look it up a lot faster online. And then if you go over and turn on some of the other layers, you can see what's going on, like water quality. You turn on the water quality assessment. You can see that the purple lines and the orange lines, which it will tell you what the if it's supporting or not. So this one looks like it's not supporting, as you can see coming down through here. So there's obviously, and when you click on the identify, it will tell you that as well when you go into it to tell you what is associated for that impaired waters. Stop it. Hit it. There we go. It'll tell you what's not supporting, and it will give the code for it, and it will tell you what the information is for why it's not supporting. It's also a class 7 waters. You can scroll through here and get all the other information as well. This one was slightly stressed, so it was really good in 2001, this wetland area, but now unfortunately, as you can see over time, it's getting worse and worse. So now it's somewhat stressed and somewhat severely stressed. So it's definitely going downhill. Same thing with the water quality as well. That's getting worse.
Michelle, we have a couple questions. Can I break in?
Oh, absolutely.
So what kind of data is used to determine the state of stress?
So Virginia Institute of Marine Science, again, this gets into the background of how it was created. They did a formula. They looked at several factors that stress the landscape, and then they came up with a formula of how that is affected by habitat and water quality. So for example, they looked at, gosh, it's like 12 of them all together, like mowing, grazing, herbicides. I can't think of all of them off the top of my head since it's been so long ago. So if anybody wants that background information, I can definitely provide that to them through email. But it's several factors. It was, gosh, water quality factors that went into the formula. So they basically created a formula that generated the numbers based on those stressors.
Gotcha. So have one here. Goodness, apologize if you already covered this, but is a WetCAT evaluation being considered as part of a complete application? I'm trying to understand how to best utilize this and what the expectations are.
Dave, I'm gonna let you handle that question.
No, it's not part of a complete application. It's, it's information that we hope you and your clients are using as you plan your projects. Of course, the WetCat data is based on NWI. So, that's only so useful and does not replace an on-site delineation. But there are other tools and other uses that we hope you and your clients are going to use as you go through your project analysis and alternatives analysis and those things.
Michelle, I've got a question. I saw somewhere while you were flipping through that there was a permit number. Looks like you put a permit number in there, I guess, in search. Is there a way to kind of backdoor it where like you're filling out your JPA or your PJD and it says, has there been an evaluation on this site before? And you don't know of one, but you saw some old flags out there.
The way that I would do it is just to go and go to this area here and go to your site. So like say if your site this is your site or whatever, go to your site and then click on the VWP, general and individual permits, and do it for the core as well. But again, we don't have all of them for the core in here. It's going to be a continuous update from them. So, and it's only what we can kind of get, because they apparently, the core, as I understand it, it's hard to retrieve information out of forms. And so we finally found somebody who was really good at it at the Corps of Engineers. And so we're trying to work with that person to get the information as much as possible as they have time to allow to do so. So anyway, so that being said, like I would go in the back way and do it this way and look. So this one right here, you can click on this and it will tell you what the permit is. So there's the permit number. This is, let's see. We'll give you all the information associated with that permit number, as in the impacts and the type. So already constructed back in 97, so that's kind of an old one. So that would be my suggestion, to go in like a back way to look just to see if there's any VWP permits associated with your site in or near the area.
Awesome. Thank you. We're going to squeeze one last question in, and then because we are at 1 o'clock, but we have one last question. Is new data, i.e. new delineations, developments, logging, etc., automatically factored into the data formula used to determine state of stress?
No, the whole entire formula, because Virginia is not like one of the smaller states like Delaware that was able to get funding and go and digitize all their wetlands in their state because it's so small. Unfortunately, we are reliant upon NWI maps. And I have been trying for years and years and years to, try to find funding for Virginia, to do something like like Delaware, but it's really hard and stuff. So as it is now, if consultants want to give us their delineations to upload into here, that would be great, because the more delineations that we can get, the better overall that WetCAT will become and stuff, until we can get to a point where we can figure out a way to either get funding to digitize all the wetlands in Virginia, or to come up with a better way than NWI maps to identify wetlands.
Awesome. Well, thank you, both you and Michelle, all of our vault members that have, put this together, and everything. Nick, thank you so very much. Let's see. Oh yeah, Kimley Horn, thank you so very much for hosting today. And I think that's it for now. We'll have a link to this soon on our webpage. Keep in touch with us, and we will see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.